In World War II, some of the most astonishing Special Forces operations changed the tide of history. Now we retell these stories in a way that has never been possible before, using state-of-the-art graphics, expert analysis, live weapon and explosives demos, and first-person accounts from the men who made history. We forensically examine exactly how these actions unfolded minute by minute. We can now reveal whether it was skill, clever tactics, or just luck that carried the day. In this episode, British forces attempt perhaps the boldest raid in military history, to crash a destroyer packed with explosives into the heart of a heavily defended German naval facility. This is the story of the legendary Saint-Nazaire raid, as told by the destroyer's captain, Lieutenant Commander Sam Beatty, Commander Major Bill Copeland, and two young officers, Karen Purdon and Stuart Chant. They must blow the docks to smithereens, right under the enemy's noses, and then make their escape by boat. They were warned it might be a one-way mission, but if they succeed, they could end the battle raging in the North Atlantic and change the course of the war. "40 miles off the coast of France, HMS Campbelltown, an aging destroyer weighing over 1,000 tons, is amongst a raiding flotilla moving through the darkness towards the German-held port of Saint-Nazaire. On either side, a column of small motor launches, bristling with machine guns and cannon. Crammed below decks, 269 elite British Army commandos steel themselves for what lies ahead. They know the next few hours have the potential to decide the course of the entire war. 2.5 years into World War II, Nazi Germany dominates Europe. A desperate campaign rages in the North Atlantic, where British survival depends on convoys bringing supplies from its new ally, America. Now, Germany threatens to unleash a weapon that could wreak havoc along those vital convoy routes. The Tirpitz is the most powerful battleship in the German Navy, more deadly even than her famed sister ship, the Bismarck. But her huge size poses a dilemma for the German Navy, one that only Saint-Nazaire can solve.
The reason that the dock at Saint-Nazaire was so important was because it was the only dry dock in Western Europe that could handle a ship the size of the Tirpitz. It was the only place that the Tirpitz could get repaired. If they couldn't repair the Tirpitz, then they couldn't risk sending it out into battle. Destroying the dry dock destroyed the battleship, even if they never touched the actual battleship itself.
Bombers aren't accurate enough to destroy the dock from the air. The French resistance can't move enough explosives into such a well-guarded port. Only a commando raid by sea can succeed. The plan was audacious. A British raiding force must sneak 18 boats and a destroyer 5 miles up the Loire estuary under the noses of German defenses, who are manning searchlights and ready to unleash a battery of coastal guns, powerful enough to sink their ships with a single hit. They will set a delayed action fuse on board the destroyer, timed to detonate 8 hours after it is rammed into the dry dock. If the ships make it through the deadly guns, then assault teams must storm the docks and plant explosives before 5,000 highly trained enemy can react. They are armed with a massive arsenal of weapons from 20 and 40mm cannons to machine guns. Then, while the explosive teams complete their objectives, the remaining commandos must keep open their only means of escape, a jetty where the motor launches will be waiting to take them home. But holding off 5,000 heavily armed Germans and making it past the guns alive won't be easy. Once they exit the Loire, they hope the timer will detonate the bomb on board the destroyer and blow the dry dock gate to smithereens.
There were a lot of stages to the raid. It was a very complicated plan. Everything had to happen in a certain sequence, and it had to happen precisely for the operation to succeed.
The cornerstone of the operation is HMS Campbelltown. To blow the dock gate, 4.5 tons of high explosives have been packed into her hull with an 8-hour time delay fuse. Her 4-inch guns have been replaced by a 12-pounder gun and 8 Oerlikon 20mm cannon, each firing 450 rounds per minute. Extra armor has been welded to her sides and wheelhouse to protect her crew from the heavy fire she'll come under from enemy shore defenses. Finally, the raiders disguise the ship, hoping to bluff their way as close to the target as possible. They cut down 2 of her funnels to make her look like a German destroyer, and will fly a German naval flag from her mast. Campbelltown and the rest of the flotilla enter the estuary of the Loire River. The destroyer's captain is 33-year-old Lieutenant Commander Sam Beatty. Only recently given command of the ship, Beatty was told his first mission would be to crash her into an enemy dock. But he's an experienced officer with a cool head and a steady nerve.
The first evidence of the enemy's defenses came when the searchlights on the north shore were switched on, swept north, then south, but stopped sweeping just before picking up the rear vessels of the squadron.
Beatty knows the raid needs all the help it can get. As he searches the skies, the sound of the diversionary air attack overhead grew louder. British bombers had arrived over Saint-Nazaire, right on cue.
The RAF bombing at the beginning was intended both to distract the Germans from what was coming from the sea and also, hopefully, do enough damage to the German defenders that they would be trying to recover from that and not paying attention to what was coming at them from the ocean.
But the result is not what the raiders had hoped. The commandos had requested a large-scale bombing raid with 350 aircraft, but only get 62 because the Air Force refuses to divert aircraft from its main bombing campaign. To make matters worse, thick cloud obscures the port. The RAF won't risk killing large numbers of French civilians, and few bombs are dropped. Instead, the bombers circle overhead, hoping this will prove enough of a diversion. But their unusual behavior only raises German suspicions.
This small-scale raid didn't distract the Germans, it only put them on alert. When the 3 services work together, the effects can be devastating. But in this instance, inter-service rivalry and poor communication seriously jeopardized the success of this mission.
For now, Beatty and the raiders remain undetected as they slip past the German radar station at Le Croisic. The next hurdle? A shallow channel in which the Campbelltown could run aground at any moment.
There was only one route into the port, and it was heavily guarded by the Germans. But the British noticed that at high tide, there was actually an alternate way to get to the dry dock. If you took very light ships, or specially lightened ships, you could sail them over the sand flats and come right up onto the dry dock from a different angle.
The Campbelltown was stripped of all items not essential to the raid to make her lighter. But even with a high spring tide, there would be only inches to spare. There's a sudden, awful juddering aboard Campbelltown as she hits the sandbank. Below decks, Lieutenant Karin Purden, a volunteer from the Royal Ulster Rifles. Only 20, he's already a veteran of an earlier commando raid on Norway. He'll lead one of the demolition teams tasked with destroying vital dockyard targets.
We felt her dragging herself, propellers thrashing, through the mud, and were greatly relieved when she was floating freely once more.
Lieutenant Stuart Chant, rugby player and former stock exchange runner, is leading another demolition team. He's on deck when Campbelltown grounds for a second time.
A few seconds later at 055 hours, we slowed again as our propeller screws somehow drove us across yet another sandbar.
It's a heart-stopping moment. If the destroyer becomes grounded, she'll be at the mercy of the German guns as soon as the sun rises. The defenses around Saint-Nazaire were formidable. In theory, impregnable. 28 guns, from 75mm cannon to massive 240mm railway guns, protected the entrance to the estuary. 43 more guns protected the approach to Saint-Nazaire, mostly 20mm and 40mm cannon, used for both coastal and anti-aircraft defense. There were searchlights along both banks of the river. In the port itself, yet more guns. Close defense units guarded the port. They could quickly summon hundreds of reinforcements from nearby garrisons. Purdon, Chant, and the rest of the commandos are sailing into the jaws of death. They know that many of them won't be coming back.
The guys were told it was pretty much a one-way ticket. But the camaraderie was such that they didn't care. As long as they were together, they'd go into any situation. This is the kind of dedication you get from a tight-knit and elite unit like the Commandos.
On HMS Campbelltown's foredeck, Major Copeland is second in command. A World War I veteran, and at 44, the oldest commando on the raid. Now he scans the hostile shore, looking for signs of enemy activity.
On we sailed in that hushed river. No sound save the steady beat of our engines and our own murmured conversation.
The flotilla is just 2 miles from its target. Suddenly, more searchlights blaze into life. They soon pick up the Campbelltown and the motor launches. But the Germans hesitate. The Campbelltown's flying a German flag. She might be one of their own. Beatty has one more trick up his sleeve. When the Germans signal a challenge and fire warning shots, he replies using a German call sign, signaling that they're firing on a friendly ship. Every second gained is precious as the destroyer steams closer and closer to its target. For a few crucial minutes, the bluff works. But when the ship refuses to stop, the Germans realize they've been tricked, and all hell breaks loose. As a deluge of fire is unleashed from all sides, the mission is compromised, and they haven't even reached their target. As German bullets and shells rain in on the British raiding force approaching Saint-Nazaire, Beatty orders the German flag to be taken down and the white ensign raised. Then, the whole flotilla opens up.
Campbelltown opened fire with all guns aiming at searchlights. These usually went out when fired at, waited a short time, and came on again.
World War I veteran Major Bill Copeland has never seen anything like it.
It seemed as though every gun on Earth had opened fire on us. In immediate reply, our Oerlikon guns aft opened up with their deadly crackle.
Developed by a Swiss company, the Oerlikon cannon was widely used by both the British and American navies as an anti-aircraft gun. Firing 20mm explosive shells at a rate of over 7 per second, it was brutally effective against light armored targets, but lacked the punch to take on enemy fortifications, soon to prove a serious handicap for the raiders. Commando machine gunners join in, firing 500 rounds a minute from Bren guns, the staple British infantry support weapon of World War II.
This is the Bren gun, the British light machine gun. It's a really chunky, good piece of kit. The magazine has a distinctive shape. Comes off easy enough. It's solid and robust. Holds 30 rounds. Slots in quickly. If this weapon has any vice whatsoever, it's almost that it's too accurate. When you're firing, the grouping is almost too tight. What you want with a support weapon is a slightly wider grouping to keep the enemy's heads down. The new modern-day general-purpose machine guns are actually designed to be less accurate than this World War II weapon.
Even with the Bren's famed stopping power, it's a one-sided firefight. British ships lit up by searchlight beams are easy targets. Casualties quickly start to mount. Peeking over Campbelltown's armored screen, Lieutenant Chant can see the small mortar launches are being riddled with shells.
There were fires blazing on the surface of the river astern of us, where more of our motor launchers were fighting their desperate battle for survival against the overwhelming firepower of the German guns.
15 Fairmile B motor launches carry the bulk of the commandos in and will be their means of escape. They are wooden boats, 112 feet long, with two 600 horsepower engines producing top speeds of 20 knots. 2 Oerlikon cannons and machine guns provide fire support. Normally used for coastal patrols and submarine hunting, they were never designed for an assault role, but they are all the Navy can spare. Their greatest weakness? A complete lack of armor. Even a rifle bullet could pass through the side. Worse, to get them to Saint-Nazaire and back, extra gas tanks have to be installed on their decks. A single hit and the entire motor launch could become a floating gasoline bomb. Purdon, below decks on Campbelltown, is better protected than most, but even he's not safe.
We felt and heard the hammering of German shells and bullets striking against Campbelltown's hull. A shell, glowing red, passed through the wardroom as we sat there, but continued out without exploding.
The armored wheelhouse is taking heavy hits from all sides. Helmsman Chief Petty Officer Wellstead is hit and killed. His replacement is struck down within seconds. Into the breach steps Lieutenant Nigel Tibbets, the man in charge of packing the ship with its deadly cargo of high explosives.
Lieutenant Tibbets then took over the wheel, altered round the old mole, and steered the ship to the lock.
18 knots and only 100 yards to go. We hung on like grim death to any protection, expecting a terrific shock, and then impact.
She was brought suddenly, judderingly to a stop, her bows jammed into and over the gate.
Thanks to a remarkable piece of seamanship, Campbelltown successfully completes the first stage of the raid. Lieutenant Commander Beatty's only remark, "Well, there we are, 4 minutes late." The Royal Navy have done their job. Now the commandos must do theirs. The commandos are an elite force formed for just such an operation. They are the brainchild of Prime Minister Winston Churchill, created to hit back at Hitler by launching lightning strikes against Fortress Europe.
Churchill, who always had a great turn of phrase, called them butcher and bolt operations. We're going to butcher some Germans and then we're going to bolt away.
Every commando had volunteered from a regular unit for special service and survived a rigorous selection process. Stuart Chant, who plays for the famous London Wasps rugby club, makes the grade.
Every man had to be able to swim. Since the units had no transport, they had to march long distances non-stop. The standard set for all ranks was 60 miles in 24 hours, almost twice the speed of the standard infantryman. We were also initiated into the skills of handling explosives, demolition, and unarmed combat.
2 former policemen from Shanghai, William Fairbairn and Eric Sykes, trained the commandos in hand-to-hand combat. They also design a new knife for them, based on their experience of street fighting.
The Fairbairn Sykes knife is synonymous with the commandos and special forces. In fact, this knife is still the insignia on the commando's badge to this day. It was a beautiful, thin, slender blade designed to go into the rib cage deep and come out without any problems whatsoever.
For weeks, the commandos trained relentlessly for street fighting at night, while demolition teams practiced by laying charges over and over again. For the raid, the commandos are divided into two types of team. Demolition teams, like those led by Chant and Purdon, will blow up dockyard facilities. They carry rucksacks with up to 90 pounds of explosives per man. This heavy load meant the only weapon they carried was a Colt .45 pistol. The remaining commandos are split into assault teams to take out enemy positions and protect the demolition squads as they work. They're heavily armed with automatic weapons, including Bren guns and the American .45 caliber Thompson machine gun.
This is the M1 Thompson submachine gun. It's an American gun.
Now the commandos' moment has come. As the motor launches begin their landings, the men aboard the battered Campbelltown are already racing off towards their targets. Campbelltown's 70 or so commandos are divided into 9 teams. 2 assault teams will lead the way, taking out enemy positions on the left and right. In their wake, the demolition teams will move forward to their targets. Lieutenant Chant's team to the dry dock pump house, Lieutenant Purdon's to the north winding shed, and more teams to the north dock gate and south winding shed. When all their targets are destroyed, they will withdraw to the extraction point. Commando assault teams take out enemy gun emplacements in the immediate vicinity, buying the raiders crucial minutes before the Germans can respond to their sudden small-scale invasion. They clear a path for Lieutenant Chant and his demolition team, making their way to the pump house. The pump house raises and lowers the water level of the dry dock. Its destruction is second in importance only to the dock gate itself. A small charge blows in the locked door. Chant has been wounded in the leg during the run-in and has to painfully and carefully make his way down several flights of steps to the basement. The waterproof charges are carefully placed to cause maximum damage. Chant's team use an explosive that's up to almost twice as powerful as TNT.
We are going to simulate our pump house with a washing machine. It's got a pump in it. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some plastic explosive that was actually used to sabotage the pump house. We've got a modern equivalent, but it's based on the same explosive, RDX. We're going to take 100 grams, we're going to place it on top of the washing machine, put a detonator in it, and see what happens. Charge was to here, and it's basically punched straight down through the washing machine and completely wrecked it. It's just an easy to use, easy to carry, easy to deploy, powerful explosive, perfect for that sort of sabotage operation.